everybody, I'm Zenith, and welcome back to the Disney Debate, where Kat Mac and I talk about Disney products and Disney in general. And today we are here with yet another movie you have never heard of. Yay!
Yay!
How's it going today, Kat?
Oh, it's a fine day, my laddie. I'm learning about my Scottish heritage.
And you're having lots of haggis.
Yes, haggis, which is actually not that bad. Tastes a lot like liverwurst. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna have fun with this podcast, because this is the movie we're about to talk about is particularly, sentimental to me just because it pertains to my own family heritage, so I'm very excited indeed.
Today we are talking about Roy the Highland Rogue, and yes, there can be only one in this film. But no, he's not the Highlander. This is basically, it's kind of like Braveheart in the fact that it's about a historical figure from Scotland who participated in, a clan war, and it's about how he became a rogue. It reminds me a lot of Robin Hood in the fact that this is, well, first of all, the same actor who played Robin Hood and the person in The Sword and the Rose. That guy, Richard Todd, is the main character here, and he plays the same kind of roguish figure who's just trying to outwit the imperious forces of Britain.
Yes, what a stretch.
So it's another historical type film, but because it's Disney, it's not completely accurate. I will give them this, though. They did have a lot of the general points of Scottish history correct, and I have to say, this film is probably the best out of the live-action movies that we've seen, in my opinion. Let's see, Treasure Island was boring. It had a little bit of the spark, but it just, overall, I didn't think it held up to other Treasure Island stuff. Robin Hood and His Merry Men was good, but I think the major problem with that was the villains, and that they weren't really a main part of the storyline, and some of it meandered about. It was very enjoyable, but it did kind of meander. The Sword and the Rose tried to do both, and failed at both.
Yeah.
And now we have this, and I have to say, this is a very enjoyable story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, basically take the story of Robin Hood, make him Scottish, put all of the merry men, instead of in tights, put them in kilts, and just unleash them on the British. And have fun with that.
And instead of, spending too much focus on the side characters, which is another big problem of Robin Hood, we have these clansmen. They're not very characterized, but at the same time, you understand where they're coming from. They behave as a clan. They're just a bunch of people who are going to protect Roy in a fight. And I think that really comes across. I think that was a better direction than just having every single person characterized.
Agreed. I mean, true that there's really not that many characters you can distinguish from one another, or that you can sort of identify, but at the same time, you don't really need to. You just need to know that, these are strong Scottish clansmen. You know that they're going to kick ass. They're going to fight to the very end. They're going to follow Roy through hell and back. And that's what makes them cool. Yeah,
that does make them cool. So let's talk about the titular character himself, Roy, or also known as Rob MacGregor of the Clan MacGregor.
From which I hail.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Kat Mac's full name is Kat Macgregor, so this is actually a story of her ancestry.
Yep. And if I might, I would like to give you all a little backstory on that.
Tell us, enlighten us on the ways of the clan.
Sure thing. Now to borrow a quote from Linkara, time for backstory.
Oh.
First on just some general information on, the MacGregor clan itself. The MacGregors hailed from the Clan Gregor, which was named after the youngest son of Alpine, who was one of the first kings of Scotland. Not much is known about the family, like, early on in their history because of the invasions by England and Vikings and everything. So a lot of documents got lost, and of course, other invaders, would, mix their DNA in with that of the MacGregors. So their genealogy and general, family hierarchy is kind of scrambled a bit, and there's like a lot of people saying that, oh, well, they're actually descended from Vikings, or they're descended from Pictish and Irish kings, or heck, they're even descended from the infamous Macbeth. I mean, how awesome is that?
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is, they hail from royalty. And even when they were no longer, when they no longer had royal titles, they were still pretty land rich. That is until the 14th century, after they took part in a few battles for Scottish independence. The resident king, Robert the Bruce, decided to be a dick and sell off all the MacGregor's lands to the clan Campbell. And this is where the forever animosity between the two clans started, the MacGregors versus the Campbells. And this went on for decades, till eventually the MacGregors were completely driven off their land. And pretty much they were resorted just, to outlaws. And the only way they were able to make a living was by becoming cattle rustlers and deer poachers, which, wasn't really that good of a profession or anything, but they were so good at it and so successful in, getting cattle for themselves that the other clans actually had to pay them in order for them not to steal their cows. Seriously, how badass is that?
It's like, I'm going to steal your cattle, and if you don't want me to steal your stuff, pay me. What thief has the balls to say that? I mean, really?
So yeah, they managed to survive pretty good off of that. Unfortunately, it did cause a lot of problems with other clans, like not only the Campbells, but also the McLarens and the Drummonds, who at times had members of their own clans mercilessly killed by the MacGregors. So, true, they were, guys who were, stripped of everything and resorted to being outlaws, but at the same time they kind of partook in outlawish behavior. So, it's
kind of a chicken and the egg scenario where, yes, they were driven to do this sort of thing, but they continued to do it once they were successful at it. Mm-hmm. So you can't fault them, but you can fault them at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, this got so bad to the point that in 1603, after they actually killed the king's head forester, who had killed members of their clan for poaching deer. And because this was considered a slight against the king himself, the king James VI made a decree saying that the MacGregors would be officially banished from society, and it would be illegal for anybody to bear the name MacGregor. So he actually made it illegal to have a last name.
Have the last name MacGregor.
Right.
I mean, they could have called themselves different names and stuff like that, and it would be fine. But
true, but at the same time, how many times in history have you heard of a last name being outlawed?
Yeah, and it may seem trivial today, especially because there are so many names, but back then there was a lot of pride in clan, heritage. You had, like in Braveheart, where it's just like, we are the clan, we're one unit. You can take our pride, you can take our women, but you can't take our freedom and the name MacGregor. That's the kind of mindset that was behind this.
Mm-hmm. And of course, some of the clan members did change their names because, they knew they would get killed if they were caught, still going by the names. Others, of course, they would still keep it and go into hiding, in which case they would be hunted down, and then others would actually rise up in rebellions and fight against those who were trying to capture them. And this went on for about nearly 200 years, where MacGregor clansmen were just hunted down by other clan members for reward money and then publicly executed. And it wasn't until 1774 where they were finally pardoned and allowed to use their real names. But it was because of all this that the MacGregor clans had been greatly reduced and were scattered, throughout Europe. So, that is the history of MacGregor. Now, how does this fit into Rob Roy? As you obviously know, Rob Roy hails from the MacGregor clan. Was born in 1671 to Donald MacGregor and Margaret Campbell. Yes, his mother was a Campbell, because the Campbell clan, as part of their methods of gaining land from the Gregors, would have their women be married off to them, so that way technically they inherited the land as well. His mother, was a good lady. She sided with the MacGregors fully, and Rob Roy, at the age of 18, actually joined his father in part of the Highland Warriors group for the Jacobite Rising. And for those of you who don't know, the Jacobite Rising was a series of rebellions orchestrated by supporters of King James II, or 7th of Scotland. And the story behind him is that he was dethroned by William III of England, and they were basically just trying to get him back into power, because they figured, hey, if we get this guy back into power, maybe, he'll go easy on us and we can get our name back. But unfortunately, that would not happen, and King James would never again be on the throne. But Rob, he, fought valiantly every chance that he got. He led his men valiantly into battle. Sometimes he would be victorious, other times not. He was badly wounded on several occasions. Unfortunately, his mother and father died rather tragically, and Rob himself, after some of the battles were over, he became a cattleman himself. And he married his wife Mary, had 4 sons, and he kept the cattle ranch going and stuff until one day he sent his head herder over to the bank to get a loan for some money so that way he can expand his cattle. Unfortunately, the guy went missing with the money. He was subsequently kicked out of his house and had to watch it burn to the ground. And it was all because the Duke of Montrose, who he borrowed money from, was a huge dick and wanted to see him suffer. So, now a penniless outlaw, Rob Roy waged a blood war against the Duke for about a couple of years until he was finally forced to surrender and imprisoned. And it was during his time in prison that a fictionalized account of his life was published in English papers, and he became sort of a Robin Hood figure known as the Highland Rogue. And it was because of his high status that the King of England, George I, decided that, hey, this guy's awesome. I'm going to give him a full pardon. And thus ends the story of Rob Roy. I hope I didn't bore you too much with that.
So that's the historical account. There are a few deviations, but before we really get into that, let's talk about the main man himself, Rob Roy, who, as we said, is yet again played by Richard Todd. Now, one interesting thing to note is that Todd mentioned in an interview that his first scene where he's charging into battle, he got an injury by stepping in a rabbit hole.
Doom, doom, da-doom,
But so I think that's a little bit interesting. There's not really too much information on the backstory behind the movie, because once again, this was hard to find, but find it we did. Now, Rob Roy himself, I really like this guy, a little bit more than Robin Hood, I think, because he has the whole noble aspect of Robin Hood, but at the same time, he has a lot more pride. He has a lot more drive to him. And so he isn't just about, okay, I'm going to steal from the rich and give to the poor. He's more like, I'm going to cut you. I'm going to take all your cattle. I'm going to take back what's rightfully mine because you're doing this to my people. And then I'm going to hunt you down, and I'm going to tweak your nose. And, I really like this guy.
I like him too. And the thing that I was kind of glad that they did was that they the story takes place after the Jacobite Rising, so he already has the status of being a great leader. So, you know, there's no backstory, you know, seeing him rise to that rank or anything. But at the same time, you know, just to see, you know, a legend doing what he does best and, you know, showing why he's awesome, you know, it's so much more entertaining. And
I mean, we do get to see him in battle. We get to see him, like, the very beginning of the movie is a big scene where we see British warriors just swarming, and then we see Scottish people with wooden shields. Like, these guys are crazy. They're coming out of nowhere, and you see the rank-and-file military, the normal British military, and you think, oh, these guys they got the job done. No, the Scottish people, they swarm out of everywhere. They start taking them down. And we see the report at the end of the battle that more British soldiers died, even when they had guns against swords.
Yeah, tell me how badass that is. A sword wins against a gun.
It's ridiculous. It reminds me of the way they do things in The Patriot, a lot of guerrilla-type warfare. But these guys, even in a straight-up fight, they were crazy as hell.
Well, that's Scotsman for you. Yeah. However, they don't really win the battle, though, and are forced to retreat. But Rob Roy does get captured. But one thing you'll quickly learn about Rob Roy, he doesn't stay captured for long.
He never stays captured for long.
In fact, how many times does he escape in this film?
I think it was shown twice.
I'm pretty sure it was like 3 or 4 times.
He was captured at the end of this major battle, and then he was rescued by his clansmen and by his mom, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then he was captured again by troops crashing his wedding, of all things, and he himself, like, he escapes through the water. I'm just like, the way they film this, you can clearly see where Rob is in the water. Like, he is pretty crafty, like he's swimming, like, he's kind of like floating almost, like a dead body would, to fool them. But I'm just like, shoot him, he's right there. But then they pick up the cloth and they find out, oh no, that's not him, he discarded his clothing.
Naked time.
I can't remember any other instances of him escaping. Oh, wait, no, yeah. He was trapped in his own house again later, and so the people come to the door and they break through and they think, oh, he's here. They're harboring the fugitive. But by the time they had entered the castle, Rob had already started climbing the cliff behind the castle, and he jumped a gap, like a ravine, over to the other side and just got away.
Yep. I'm telling you, man, this guy, Houdini, this Houdini must be like his descendant or something. That could only explain why he's such a great escape artist. Because, seriously, man, like, you only see this guy, like, captured, I think, for like 5 minutes at a time before he just busts out and starts making a daring escape. It's so cool. And
like, every time someone says, you know, we got him, I'm just like, oh, you're in for a shock, buddy.
3, 2, 1. Oh, there he goes.
So yeah, I like this guy. I mean, he's crafty. He's a great swordsman. He's a warrior. And then there's one really great scene where we see that the British people have started taxing the MacGregor clan because, you know, they're giving in to the British demands. They're not going to fight back. But because Rob is being such a nuisance to them, they're saying, well, we're going to tax you. And this tax is for the British. And then here's another tax that we're just making up. And we're going to increase it until you're bled dry. And then while this guy is making his big British speech, Rob comes out of nowhere. He grabs them. And without even a struggle, they win against the British people. And so he's just like, here, you can keep the small bag of gold. We'll keep our end of the bargain. But this big one, give back to the people. And, you know, if you try to tax them, I'll take your cattle. If you burn down our houses, I will go into the king's office and punch him in the face. That, like, he basically says that. I love this guy.
And he makes good on it, too. I mean, you find out later from the Duke that, you know, half of his farmland and his troops were either cut down or stolen because, you know, they had slighted the MacGregors in one way or another.
And this is one man. Like, he ordered his men not to do anything. But if something happens to his men, he comes in and, you know, it's not just like against a few British people. The British have whole armies of people, and he's coming in and, you know, stealing their cattle without their knowing. This guy's badass.
Mm-hmm. I should mention, though, that, you know, as badass as he is a hothead. That has been shown.
That is his major flaw, I believe.
Yeah, because he's so proud of his clan and his family name and status that, you know, and while it's true that, you know, they have been given a lot of shit by the British, you know, who just keep piling on even after they give in to their demands. At the same time, you know, there are attempts by friends on his behalf in order to clear the clan's name and, you know, give them a voice for the, you know, give them a voice in court and everything. But at the same time, they're just like, fuck this, we're going to go and kill people.
I think the biggest thing, though, is that even he is a hothead, but eventually he does say, okay, let's try diplomacy again after one time. And then he flies a flag of truce, and the British people shoot him.
I know! That's such a dick move.
Like, he's standing there, and they shoot him in the shoulder. I'm like, okay, it's on. It is on now. Like, the gloves are off.
Yeah, and
I would not step down after that.
Yeah, true. And especially, I think the worst offense that they did, well, this is two parts in this offense. First off, you know, spoilers, they kill his mother. You know, she gets shot trying to defend her home, and they go and have a funeral for her, and the British actually crashed the funeral to arrest him.
First, the wedding, and he doesn't get to be with his bride because they're always there. Then the funeral for his mother, and it's only because the Duke of Argyll is there with a bunch of like clansmen in the waiting that they don't attack him. I'm like, what big dicks?
I know, these guys are worse than the Westboro Baptist Church. Jesus.
Even the six-fingered man from The Princess Bride wasn't this much of a dick.
Yeah, they're like, these guys are just like almost stereotypically evil. Like, they're Disney evil.
So yeah, there's that, and Rob Roy goes through a lot of crap in this movie, but he always manages to find himself on top. And so I really enjoyed him as a character. I liked him much better than the guy from The Sword and the Rose. I liked him better than Robin Hood, and yeah, he was one of the best main characters that they've done in a live-action movie up until this time.
Yeah, I think for the actor himself, I think he's better off playing, you know, an action hero as opposed to a romantic lead. Because even
Shakespeare, he is not. Yeah,
because even in Robin Hood, I mean, the romance between him and Maid Marian was good, but you know, you felt more of it through Maid Marian than you did through him.
Mm-hmm.
Because he seemed a bit more dickish, you know, a bit more, you know, a typical man. Like
he reminded me of Peter Pan in a lot of the things he did.
Yeah, it's like, you know, he acts like a young boy, and that's like part of his charm. And then you see him completely get into the role of a romantic lead, as we saw in Sword and the Rose. And yeah, that it just didn't work. You know, he had no enthusiasm, he had no charisma or chemistry with the other romantic lead. So really, I think that he should have just, you know, just been made an action hero. You know, I think
and it really works here. He looks good with a beard.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this works out much better for him. But speaking of Maid Marian, the other quote-unquote main character here is his wife, Helen Mary. And let me say this. this is the same actress that played Mary Tudor in The Sword and the Rose, and dear God, she is the worst thing about this film. And I'm saying this, I really enjoy the characters in the film. We're going to get into a little bit more later, but I think there's only really one weak chink in the chain, and it's her character. And she's so bland, and they can't really get a hold on her character. You start off by seeing her, and she's like being the normal housewife at an inn, and then all of a sudden she picks up a wooden stick and starts like telling this story of the war hero that her father was telling, and she starts stabbing through the air.
Yeah,
and
I kept thinking of Merida from Brave, where she's like, "And chump, Dad's leg was clean off."
But then she switches like 180 degrees. The next scene we see her in, Rob is asking to marry her, and she's just sitting there like preparing haggis, and she has no emotion whatsoever. And throughout the rest of the movie, she's either really bland or she's trying to be the mother figure. And it doesn't work. She has no consistency. She has no real drive for her character. Half her lines seem so forced and so like I didn't think she could put in a worse performance than The Sword and the Rose, but man.
Yeah, it's just, again, she's there basically to be the love interest and to sort of, be the thing that Rob Roy saves at one point. And they try to make her a strong figure by, showing that, all she knows about her father's exploits as a warrior. She knows a few moves and everything, and she's tough and all that. But they don't really, she doesn't utilize any of those strong traits at all. And in fact, she does very girlish things. Like, you obviously see at the beginning that she pines for Rob Roy. It's obvious that she's going to be his love interest, that she loves him a lot. But then once he actually actively pursues her, then she plays hard to get. And I've never really liked that in movies, where you just see a woman who would probably sell her soul in order to be with this man, suddenly turn cold and be like, oh, well, now he has to pursue me.
It's infuriating. It's degrading to men. And, this is speaking from a feminist here. So, I think, women have the right to pursue a man, but just the act of playing hard to get infuriates me. I'm sorry.
I was sort of guessing, okay, so this is her revenge for having to go after him in the last movie, so now he has to go after her.
And let me say this. Love stories in live-action Disney movies up until this point have not really worked. We didn't have one in Treasure Island. We had one, I think the best one, in Robin Hood, and I think that's what the movie's biggest strength was, okay, this is a realistic romance for Disney. This really worked. But after that, it's just been, okay, we're going to try to do both and not get any of that right. The Sword and the Rose proved that romance was crap. And
it was very forced.
Yeah. And in this film, it's basically the exact opposite of Robin Hood, where we have a major emphasis on the story and the romance just happens. And I think it works much better in this case in the fact that it is glossed over because they know they can't do a good job here. So they're going to make a good story and roll with it. And I think that works here. But still, if that is the case, Helen Mirren has far too many scenes.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, she really has no purpose being in this movie. Or at least that early on in the film. I mean, they should have made it that, he was kind of pursuing her, or she was pursuing him for a good length of the movie before they finally end up together at the end. But it's like they get together immediately, and then she's pretty much there.
In fact, she's never really with Rob Roy during the movie because, like I said, they crashed the wedding, and so he's taken away, and then he has to go into hiding. And then when he comes to see her, the one time is the one time that they crash his house. So she has no purpose being in this film.
Yeah, she falls into that status of, she's just the love interest. She's not a contributing character. And it's the same thing with the mother. I mean, the mother, is considerably more useful in this film, but at the same time, she's still the mother. That's the problem with films that have a very heavy male influence, is because all the characters are males, most of them have different characteristics, and then you have the two females, the love interest and the mother. And that's all they are.
I will say this, though. While Helen Mirren was pretty bland and stuff like that, I didn't like her character, I did really enjoy the mother. Yes, she is in the mother stereotypical role, but she is very headstrong. She actively, she's the one who saves her son from being captured. She's the one who goes to the Duke of Argyll, who's like the Secretary of State of Affairs in Scotland, and she pleads with him. She says, "Well, I'm your cousin. You're a Campbell too. I'm a Campbell. You're my cousin. So, can you let my son slide in this one?" And he's like, "I can't let it slide," but she has an idea where she's just like, well, if the carriage were waylaid on the way to London, the Highlands are pretty dangerous, she arranges for his escape. And so, we see from the very beginning that she's very crafty. She is a very enjoyable character. She actually argues it out with a lot of the men in the film. And yes, she does become a mother figure near the end of the film for her son, and she does die off. I still think she is much more of a character than Helen Mirren is.
Yeah, that's for certain. I mean, you see how confident she is in her son, because she knows that, given the proper area and means, he will escape. And you know that he'll stop at nothing to achieve his goals. And she's fully supportive of that, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it isn't until, I think, her death that she decides, hey, maybe my son should stop fighting, because I want him to live.
Yeah, and I think that's more of okay, well, we've been fighting for a long time, and nothing has changed, and, they're smoking us out. This isn't working, and so her final words were saying, it was something along the lines of, it takes more courage to stop the fire than to start it, because the fire will continue burning. We didn't start the fire, it was always burning since the world's been turning.
Pretty much. But yeah, again, despite being the mother figure, she, is a good character on her own. And I mean, you see that she does get some shit from her son, because he does yell at her for, helping him escape, for some reason.
But she holds his own against him. She doesn't back down, and he apologizes to her. Mm-hmm. And, she's just like, settle down, have a wife, stop all this fighting. I think she's a great secondary character, even if she does have some problems with her. Mm-hmm. I do enjoy the actress. I don't know the name. Again, the information on this is very scarce. But I thought she put in a great performance.
Yep. And then the next actor we have is another familiar one. So the Duke of Argyll.
The guy who played the King Henry VIII, in The Sword and the Rose. And like last time, he is awesome. Mm-hmm. I loved him in Sword and the Rose. He was the one highlight. And here he is quite a big highlight. I think he's a little bit underutilized, but he is in the beginning and the end of the film, and he does have a great role to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his is probably the most inaccurately portrayed role as well, because again, this is based on a historical figure. The Duke of Argyll, well, it's actually a title, but the person who inherits it has always been a member of the Campbell clan. So you would think that someone who hails from a clan that has always been at war with the MacGregors wouldn't be that helpful, but no, this guy's actually one of the most useful characters in the whole movie.
Especially because, well, like we said, his cousin is the mother to Rob Roy, so he's related to the MacGregors only slightly. But I really liked his motivations. a lot of the, he is a little bit demonized in the beginning, but we get to see what his motivations are. Basically, what he wants to do, he wants to end all the warring, and his idea is if we become friends, become peaceful with the British, they'll let us keep our office here, just let them occupy here, and they'll be fine. And if we stop all this fighting, then it'll all be done. We can have peace. And he's a very big diplomat in the film. And, it's true that the British are dicks in this film. But at the same time, you can see his side of the story. You can see, okay, well, if this can be achieved, peace might be an option. And so he's always looking for peace in the film.
Right. And I mean, to be fair on both sides, it's kind of hard, just to let the British just have their way in the Scottish Highlands, because again, this is their land, and of course we know the British is history with invading lands that isn't theirs. But at the same time, their reason for going against the king was because he's technically not English. He hails from Germany, but at the same time, that doesn't really cause any real problems. They just see that, he's not of true British heritage. So yeah, basically the guy's just trying to keep peace, and there are times where he does, swing back and forth a little bit. Because you can tell he won't aid in the escape, but he will make it convenient for the guy to escape. And at another point, he actually goes to the king himself at great risk to himself. But then once he realizes that the clan is not going to go for the peace agreement, he actually does turn around to the king and say, "I apologize for not talking sense into them. I will gladly fight with you against them."
And that's a big thing I like about Argyll, where even after his rank has been stripped away from him by the Duke of Montrose, he still has his head held high. He goes and seeks an audience with the king, even though he has no reason being there since he doesn't have a title. He goes and he talks to the king and he says, this may work. I can reason with him. And then he comes and apologizes and he says, "I'm sorry. I will go with the person who stripped my title's idea because I want peace." And so I really thought he was one of the most intelligent characters in the film. But then this leads to one of the best scenes in the film where after a whole bunch of fighting, Rob Roy has taken siege of this castle. And, after he's shot, after trying to have a truce, he goes in and his clan takes down the castle, and he's all victorious and he's all celebrating, and then Argyll comes in and is like, "What have you done? I've tried to create peace. Now you're not going to have peace. What are you doing?" And Helen Mary, in the one part that she was actually good in, she says, "Well, I don't honor you now because you did something against the will of the clan." Even though she had no business saying that, because, what did she do with any of it? She didn't fight. She didn't, But, so, Rob has a change of heart. He marches into London unarmed with only 2 guards, marches right in there, and he seeks an audience with the king. And he goes up to the king and he hands him a sword and says, "I'm your Highland Rogue. If you want to settle this, here's the sword. You can kill me right now." And the balls on this guy. This is the point where the Highland Rogue has been put into like a major storybook all around the kingdom. And so even the king has read the story. We see the king reading it with his wife. And so...
And he actually has a bit of a fanboy moment, which is really funny, because once the Duke mentions that, "Hey, let me go talk to these guys, let me bring Rob Roy back here to, present his argument to you, I'm sure we can reach an agreement," he's like, "Rob Roy? Here? Yes, definitely, go get him."
And so we have a Mulan-like moment. I think this is like an inspiration for Mulan, where the king walks up to him and he grabs a sword and he says, he starts saying, you took my cattle and all this stuff, and you can tell that he's going to say, "But you saved us all," like the kind of Emperor Mulan moment. But I think I really like this. Like, he's like, you did all this. And then Robb stands up to him, and he's like, well, you eviscerated my people. My people are, suffering because of you. And the Duke of Montrose is just like, yeah, you've just lost your life. But the king is just like, well, I like this guy's balls. He's got some pretty big chutzpah. So he's like, why not? You get full pardon. You get your name back.
Convenience.
So it pays to have a king who's a fanboy of you. But I really like that moment. Like I said, it feels like the scene in Mulan where she goes to the Emperor and presents the sword to him, and he starts saying all the bad things he's done, like, you destroyed my palace. And then he stops and says, but you saved us all.
And yeah, while it's true, Rob Roy didn't really save anybody. The only time he actually really tries to save someone is, when he presents himself to the king, in order to get amnesty for his clan. That's like the first real self-sacrificing moment you see for him. So,
still some pretty big balls.
Yeah, and you could tell that the king respected that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the Duke of Montrose is none too pleased.
Yeah, that's the one character we haven't mentioned much up until now. The Duke of Montrose is this guy who originally worked next to the Duke of Argyll. Basically, his deal is, we want the Highlands, we're going to use brute force. I'm not a Highlander, so I don't care. And so he constantly butts heads with Argyll, who, although he wants peace, he is a Highlander, and he doesn't like being insulted by Montrose. But when Argyll saves MacGregor, then he's stripped of his title, and so Montrose becomes the new Secretary of State of Scotland. And so he's the one trying to eviscerate MacGregor, like every single thing. He's just like, MacGregor, I'll get you next time, Gadget.
Yeah, like I mentioned, he's pretty much the antagonist of the story and, like, the stereotypical bad guy. Like, at every single turn, he is seen doing something evil. I mean, he boots the Duke of Argyll off of his position and claims it for himself. He crashes Rob Roy's wedding and arrests him. He taxes the Highlanders simply because they're related to Rob Roy. He shoots Rob Roy when he attempts to make peace. He crashes the guy's mother's funeral, and then he has the balls to go back to London and tell the king, oh, these Highlanders are a bunch of barbarians who only understand violence. Give me about 6,000 men and I can wipe the area clean of them.
And a lot of the people in the room are like, 6,000? What? That's too many. And he's like, well, we got to use brute force. We got to crush this menace right now.
Mm-hmm. So he's pretty much perpetuating the theory that the Scottish Highlanders are nothing more than a bunch of barbaric cavemen who, who have no empathy and only know violence. But at the same time, that's all this guy has been doing. Yeah,
and so while he doesn't have too much character, he has a lot of personality, and I really like that about him. For the live-action Disney movies we've seen up until now, there hasn't really been a very good villain, other than Long John Silver, perhaps, but even Silver didn't really have official villain status. He was more glorified. Like I said in Robin Hood, the big problem was the villains, they weren't around very much, and they did despicable things, but it was very sparse what they were doing. Sword in the Rose, there were too many villains. There were too many villains. They all wanted the same thing, and they were just like, I want to bone this chick. This is the first really major live-action villain that we've gotten up until this point. He's constantly doing villainous things. He's constantly trying to drive the MacGregors out of Scotland, and kill them off or just, tax them. And I really like him as a villain.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's the typical Disney villain. He just tries to one-up himself with every single scene that he's in. Like, he's the type of guy who would go up to you, punch you in the face, break your neck, then shoot you from behind, and then do the same thing to your dog. So that's the type of bad guy this is. And actually, you want to know something really, really interesting?
Yes?
The actor who plays him, he plays Alfred in the first 4 Batman movies.
Really?
Yep.
That's Alfred?
Yes, so imagine Alfred doing all those evil things. Which further perpetuates my belief that Alfred is the true villain in Batman. You know, he's the reason why the bad guys keep escaping.
So, those are our characters. I think this film has a lot more characterization than a lot of the previous live-action Disney films up until this point. We have a very, very strong main character. We have a lot of strong minor characters. We have a strong villain who's constantly doing villainous things, and he's constantly raising the stakes, making the story interesting. I mean, in a lot of these live-action films, there are spaces where not much happens. In this film, there's stuff constantly happening, and when you feel like there's a climax, then something even worse happens. And so that's what I really enjoyed about this film. I don't think the pacing was quite as good as it could have been, but the characters really made this film, excluding Helen Mirren.
Yeah, I mean, the only things, like you said, really hurt this film is the love interest, who shouldn't be there in the first place, and the overall pacing. Because I'll admit, the first half of the movie, up until they get their names taken from him, I found it kind of boring. But
I think it was great build-up, but then again, it's the same syndrome as The Godfather. A lot of people will be like, get on with it.
Yeah, so... But other than that, the movie is pretty good, in terms of action and everything. I mean, it keeps you on the edge of your seat and wondering, okay, how's he going to get out of this one? Or what's the clan going to do this time? So it really is engaging.
I mean, it's a great story. There's a lot of good action here. I really love the character of Rob Roy. The music. Now, this is another case where we can't really identify individual songs in terms of the music. But, dear God, I love this music. There is a lot of bagpipes in this, and bagpipes are like nature's... I don't know what to say. I love bagpipes.
I like them, too. I mean, I know some people can find them loud and obnoxious, and there are times where they are a little hard to listen to, especially if they're, played really loud, like right next to your ear. But for the most part, I do enjoy it. And I do like, the Scottish music, the Gaelic tones that they add to this. It really helps with the atmosphere. So, I mean, this is more so than any of the other live-action films, and I know I've been saying that a lot. This music really drives the film. It feels tonally fitting with the film. It feels culturally fitting with the film, which some of these other live-action films didn't quite get. Other than maybe Robin Hood. But still, like, it just really fits with the time period and with the culture that this film is trying to represent. And I really like that. Yeah, one of the things that I personally found disappointing, though, is that they never have any of the characters really sing any Gaelic songs, or any of those Scottish songs or anything. I mean, they obviously play the music and the bagpipes, but there's, like, no one to sing along to it. I mean, there's only 2 instances. The first one is at Rob Roy's wedding, where these 2 women, I guess, are singing along, but their accents are just so nasally and muddled that they sound like chickens.
They sound like chipmunks.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was going, cheep, 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 cheep. You a chicken, Mark? Cheep, 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 cheep.
Yeah, so there was that, and then the second part was when the men are waiting in a cave for Rob Roy to return from his latest escape, and one of the younger members starts singing this very pretty Scottish tune, and then the guy tells him, hey, shut up.
Hey, stop that, stop that.
Stop that, no singing. So like I said, that's my only disappointment in terms of the music, is that I was hoping they'd have some sort of, solo performance, just to build up, like, the action, one of their battle scenes or something.
Yeah, I think that's a big detriment. Like, I think the instrumental music works really well here. I really wish they had included more of this clan-type songs, and they do represent it, but it's very few and far between. It's almost like we could have done with more of that. I think it's the opposite of what happens in So Dear to My Heart, where you have that guy who actually kind of looks Scottish. You have the guy singing these exposition songs like 5 times every minute. And then you have this. And in this film, those songs work because they're actually like part of the culture. They're part of like what this film is about, and we could have used with more of them. So Dear to My Heart, what the hell were you doing?
What the hell were you doing with that entire movie?
I have no idea. But
yeah.
So what more can I say about this film? Obviously it's live action, so we can't talk about animation.
We should mention that one scene though where they try to add in the CGI effect.
Oh yes. No, this is the best CGI ever. When Rob is escaping from his house and he's climbing the cliffside, people are pursuing him. He gets a boulder and he starts pushing it down, and we get this really awkwardly meshed CG boulder like going over them, and they don't fall down. Like you can clearly see that they aren't affected.
Yeah, let's put it this way. It would look a lot more realistic if A, they got a styrofoam ball, painted it gray, and pushed it down on them, or B, they took a paper cutout of a boulder and just, moved it across the camera. That would look a lot more realistic than the CGI effect they use with that boulder.
I will say this, though. For the time, it was probably really good effects. And if you've ever heard of this movie, it is definitely better than the effects in The Amazing Bulk.
Can't say I've heard of it, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. The Amazing Bulk is basically a film that was created a few years ago and has worse effects than stuff from the 1920s.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll give it credit. I mean, I'm sure, for the 50s, there really wasn't that much, good effects for that, but still, like, to this, in this day and age, when you see something like that, it's just so cheesy, you can't help but burst out laughing.
Yeah, I definitely laughed at that, and I think that's one of the high points of films like these, where there were some small points in The Sword and the Rose where I'm just like, that's so silly, let's talk about it. I like that. Yeah, that's this Boulder type deal.
It's like the old Star Trek special effects.
So, overall, what did you think of Rob Roy, the Highland Rogue?
I really enjoyed watching it. Like I said, it's part of my heritage. I love learning more about my heritage and my ancestors. And while it's true that this is probably, jazzed up a bit, just and romanticized a lot just to make it more engaging for the audience, it still is really cool to see that, my family has had that big of an impact in history. And that, while it's true he wasn't technically a great king or, major inventor or anything like that, he still made an impact in history, and I really find that cool. And as for the movie itself, I really thought it was well done. The fight scenes are great, the action, I love the music, the characters, minus the female lead, they're pretty good. I think their accents. Obviously, this is a British cast, so of course, they're pretending to do Scottish accents, and sometimes, it tithers in and out. But for the most part, they do a really good job portraying their characters, and it was a very engaging story, and I really liked it. I'm fully enjoying myself while I was watching it.
Yeah, I mean, when we set up to view these live-action films, again, we hadn't heard of them. I believe you were the one who told me about Rob Roy, but, I was fully expecting to see another Boarfest like The Sword and the Rose. But no, this is engaging. This really gets your blood pumped. It's not quite as dramatic as Braveheart and movies like that, but it's still fun. It's still I really enjoyed it. The characters, like we said, with the exception of Helen Mary, are all very well rounded. They're all very well acted. And I enjoyed watching these characters. The music really benefits the music really benefits a lot of these scenes, especially the bagpipe music. And while And with that said, I do wish there was more of the actually culture songs that they were singing, but still the music went really well with it. There's really not too many problems with this movie, other than the fact that it was created in the 50s, so it may seem a little bit dated to some.
And they have
some of
done
the
a
camera
remake.
angle. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Some of the camera angles are a little bit boring and static. You can tell this was filmed kind of on a tripod. But yeah, it's the 50s. You got to expect that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there actually has been a remake of it, in recent years. I think it's just Rob Roy, and I think they have Liam Neeson playing the leads. I mean, I haven't seen it or really heard about it, but
I have heard of it because in my search for Rob Roy the Highland Rogue, the only copies that I found for a long time were Rob Roy. And
right.
I had to search for the specific year that this movie was made in, because no other places had the actual Rob Roy the Highland Rogue.
Which is a shame, because it's a good movie.
Yeah, it's not like Sword in the Rose. That should be forgotten. This movie, dear God, I want a copy of it.
Yeah, but, oh well, like I said, the same thing we said with Robin Hood and His Merry Men. If you could find this movie, definitely give it a watch. And,
it's available for purchase. It's going to cost you.
Yeah. And we should also mention that this was the very last movie made by RKO Pictures. Well, Disney movie anyway.
Mm-hmm. And this is the last film to ever come out of RKO Pictures or be distributed by RKO. In the last film we talked about, The Living Desert, was when things were starting to sour between Disney and RKO. And this is the final straw. This is the final film where they're like, no, we're not going to use you guys anymore. We're going to create Buena Vista. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the real history behind it is that RKO was starting to suffer because this was during the point of McCarthyism, so a lot of their employees were accused of being communists and blacklisted, so they ended up losing a lot of major contributors and players and everything. So in the course of their struggle, they were bought out by aviator Howard Hughes, who pretty much ran the company into the ground. And of course, Disney, realizing that the company not only was not making money, but was spending more than they actually had on, reshoots and cast changes and stuff. So of course he wanted to just, get off of the sinking ship while he could, which was very smart on his part. And yeah, RKO, I mean, after exchanging several hands, eventually just, bit the dust in the 60s. I mean, it's a shame, too, because RKO actually sponsored a lot of popular films. They made King Kong and Citizen Kane, and they launched Katharine Hepburn's career. So it really is a shame and kind of a tragedy when you think about it.
It is, but at the same time, I think Disney made the smart move because, I mean, their live-action features weren't really that good up until this point. And so, right after this, the next live-action film that we have to cover is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and a lot of people remember that film.
Mhm. Yeah, that's for damn sure. I mean, I haven't officially watched most of it, but I do remember seeing clips of it. I remember that giant friggin' squid.
And I do know I have a copy of this, so I mean, this isn't one we have to track down.
Mhm.
But like we said, overall, Rob Roy, if you can find it, or if you have the money to pay for it, definitely worth a watch. Mm-hmm. Next time, if we can find it, we are going to be talking about The Vanishing Prairie and Beaver, what is it called?
Beaver Valley.
And Beaver Valley. So, a lot of this is, we're going to try to track it down. I have tried finding The Vanishing Prairie before, but then again, there could be something out there that I'm just missing. So I'm going to continue my search for The Vanishing Prairie. If not, we will figure something out, but I'm pretty sure I can get a hold of it.
You watch, it's going to end up on a Barnes & Noble shelf.
Barnes & Noble! Well, come hell and high water, next time it's Beaver Valley and the Vanishing Prairie. But anyway, thank you very much for watching today's Disney debate. If you have any comments, criticisms, suggestions, or Disney movie suggestions that don't fall under main Disney canon but are distributed by Disney, or if you just want to recommend a Disney movie for us to watch, you can always comment in the comments thread at zenithrule.blip.tv, or you can follow us at Twitter at twitter.com/zenithrule and twitter.com/EphraimTRabbit. Or if you don't like Twitter and think it's a waste of time, you can always follow us on Facebook. Everyone has a Facebook. You can follow us at facebook.com/zenithrule, facebook.com/catmac, and facebook.com/the Disney Debate, where you can follow us on our fan page and, interact with us, give Disney movie suggestions, make some jokes. We are always up for interaction. But anyway, I'm Zenith Rule.
And I am Kat Mac/EphraimTRabbit/CatTCritic.
And this has been another episode of Disney Debate. We are slowly finishing up the 50s, and hopefully soon we'll get into territory where we don't have to say if we can find the film.
God willing. Well, TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Thank you for watching The Media Meltdown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. And if you like what you see, show your support on the Patreon page at patreon.com/Media Meltdown. See you all next time on The Media Meltdown.